Hello, everyone. This is Gehan Cooray. This is episode 1 of season 2 of Gehan Cooray's Meeting of the Minds, which I'm doing on behalf of Daily Mirror Online. I'm an actor, classical baritone singer, and independent filmmaker based here in Hollywood. And I have the tremendous honor of Patricia Danaher on the show today. She is one of my Hollywood neighbors, technically, as we discovered. Most of you probably know her as one of the esteemed jurors of the Golden Globe Awards, because she has been with the Hollywood Foreign Press Association since 2008. And, that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this lady. She is so multifaceted, and we're going to hear a lot from her today, not just about the film industry, but about other things that affect a lot of people all over the world, frankly. A lot of people in Hollywood live in their little bubble, but not Patricia Danaher. So, Patricia, tell us a little bit about you in your lovely accent.
Well, Gehan, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me on today. I'm very glad to have a chance to talk to you and to your audience a little bit more about some of our shared interests and passions. So I was born in the west of Ireland a few decades ago, and I grew up a very spiritual child and very closely connected to nature. We were very devout practicing Catholics. My father was also somebody who really loved the land and really imbued a great love of nature and an understanding of the cycles and this kind of the spiritual nature of, existence as expressed through the seasons and the crops and animals, etc. So I grew up with a lot of these sort of things very much innate in me. I studied journalism when I went to Dublin, and I worked in daily newspapers, and then I worked in radio and in broadcasting for much of my career. I was interested in a lot of things. I always loved music, and I was always interested in spirituality. Even when I was angry at the Catholic Church, I still always had a very strong spiritual seed in myself. And then in my early 20s, I moved to Asia. I said I'm going to travel for a year, and that turned into 3 years in Asia, 1 year in Thailand, 2 years in Japan. And these were extremely important years that I didn't really fully realize at the time, the impact of my encounter with, many aspects of Oriental culture and Japanese culture in particular, and the rituals and the deep connection which the Japanese also have with nature. Their calendar is completely peppered with holidays that mark things like the day of the insect means the start of spring, when the insects reappear, that they think about time and existence through what nature shows and the bounty or absence, but there's always something growing there. So that was very important for me, and I was already somebody who had learned transcendental meditation when I was a teenager. So while I was in Japan then, I got involved in Zen, and that very much spoke to me, this sort of clarity and simplicity and the aesthetic of it in particular. Many elements of it really resonated with me. And from there, I wasn't finished my 1 year of travel. So I then went to Argentina and lived in South America for over 2 years and studied Spanish and sort of connected with, South American, rituals and practices. And
okay.
So that's a little taster.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. And I think now I know why we connected so easily, because I was also raised Catholic like you, a big lover of nature. And I think, ladies and gentlemen, the way we know each other is because my feature film, The Billionaire, which was eligible for Golden Globe nominations and Oscar nominations earlier this year, was a film that Patricia honestly gave me the best feedback I've ever received on, because I was like, because she's also from Ireland, as was George Bernard Shaw, upon whose work I adapted The Billionaire. And when we spoke on the phone, I think I was in Sri Lanka, and actually I'm returning the favor because Patricia did an interview with me on the phone. And, now we've come full circle again. And, Patricia, I think, and I mean this very sincerely, you're one of the few people in Hollywood who is just so real and down to earth and unpretentious and all of that, and because, there is a lot of hypocrisy in Hollywood and false virtue signaling. I think, we've experienced a little bit of that with the Hollywood Foreign Press Association recently. And I guess, before we get to the more spiritual stuff, let's maybe tackle that, which is, rather a thorn in the Golden Globe side at the moment.
Yes, it's been a dreadful couple of months, really professionally, an appalling time. So how to begin to explain this? There's a lot of xenophobia in America, even though it's a nation of immigrants. There's still look at what President Obama went through. He was always considered a foreigner or an outsider. So, I think all of us encounter elements of that kind of intolerance. And the Golden Globes, which started 78 years ago as a boozy lunch in the Coconut Grove, and just by fits and starts became an extremely popular and extremely lucrative show that people really love, and the celebrities come to it and the viewers flock to it, and it's the first show of the year. And it's been a kind of a very happy accident for the people who created this institution in the first place. A group of immigrants, many people coming out of the the Second World War, a lot of people fleeing Europe out of adversity, but with a love of film and story and a great understanding about how story unifies us. It doesn't matter what tradition we come from, we all want to be told stories, and we recognize archetypes and morals and things from all different kinds of cultures. So this organization, the Hollywood Foreign Press, came into existence, and this very popular show that went from a boozy lunch to a multi-million-dollar, extremely popular TV show. But within Hollywood, there is a sort of a xenophobia, and every year when the Golden Globe nominations are announced in the American media, it's almost like they recycle the same article every year. Who are these foreigners, and how dare they adjudicate American culture? And if they don't like what the nominations are, I don't always like what the nominations are, but the attacks, it's always the funny foreigners and their accents, and they write in languages we never heard of, instead of understanding what an ignorant thing that is to say, saying these are people who write in multiple languages, who speak multiple languages. It's used in some way, in some ways as a kind of a put down. So, anyway, the publicists here have not been able to control and bully the members of the Hollywood Foreign Press the way they do other members of the entertainment community, and they make people's lives miserable. So they use the pandemic when their clients didn't have that much work, because not a lot of work was made last year. So at the start of this year, suddenly they became appalled. Suddenly they started pointing out, they accused us of racism, they accused us of sexism. They made some absolutely dreadful accusations, which they never backed up when they were asked, who said this, who did this, where did this occur? So these allegations were repeated by the media repeatedly. It was quite shocking to see how lazy journalists can be. You're repeating what one person said. So there's been a pile on. And then earlier this year, then after the Golden Globes, they said that they were going to boycott the Hollywood Foreign Press until we behaved like they think we should behave. So it's been very difficult. Many people have lost work. Many people have lost clients. We haven't been allowed access. The bullying has basically continued. And it's been so hypocritical. It's been really ridiculous, because all of these people, the publicists and their clients, benefit hugely from the visibility of the Golden Globes. And the nomination is worth a huge amount of money, plus they all get bonuses. But years of not being able to control and bully us the way they do other entertainment journalists, they use the pandemic as an excuse. So we listened, and we've taken our beatings and the lumps taken out of us in the media every day, and we've announced a lot of radical changes, and in the next couple of weeks you'll be seeing a lot more. There'll be a lot more diversity, which has been an issue, but that has more to do with the construction of the media industry, you know, than the fact that, you know, we don't like black people. I mean, we've got people from 55 languages are spoken and 44 countries, I think, are represented. So, you know, to accuse us of racism is just it beggars belief, really. And as you would also know, Gehan, you know, people are interested in different stories. You know, we're not always interested in stuff from other places, you know. So our readers, our editors, the cinema distributors, you know, they're buying movies that they think that the audiences will want. Our editors are commissioning these sort of articles. So, you know, so sometimes African American stories aren't as popular here as they might be in the US. I mean, there's a whole mixture of things, but an incredibly lazy, and I think it's xenophobia. Xenophobic attacks have been leveled against us, I think, as a way of sort of making foreigners responsible for slavery. You know, it beggars belief. And one of our chief, one of the publicists who's been the biggest bully of all, represents Time's Up. I mean, Time's Up is an absolute disgrace, and Time's Up have been calling us all kinds of appalling things. And meanwhile, their own house is in severe disarray.
Right. And I think, you know, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but I think people who think they've seen the last of the Golden Globes are going to get a very big surprise very soon.
They're going to get a huge surprise because there is significant interest in the brand. You know, the brand is valued at about $1.5 billion. It's the only show that has both that has both film and television. And it has, you know, it's the Golden Globes. It's a global brand that, in a way, the Oscars or the Emmys certainly aren't, or the BAFTAs. So, you know, that boozy lunch had a lot of foresight in combining those two media in particular. So there really isn't anything quite like it. And I think, you know, when the dust settles and the pile up finishes, you know, our brand will still be really, really strong. And there are a number of people that have come to us. Actually, since I spoke to you first, you know, 2 more billionaires have appeared. So, you know, so other people can see, you know, properly the huge value and the long established brand that exists. So there will be a Golden Globes next year. You know, we're not, you know, we've been very unfairly treated, but we own this brand, you know, and as one of the people who's in discussions with us right now said, you know, you guys created this out of nothing. And then there are these people telling you, you know, you dare not exist and how dare you not be different, you know, and really, how dare they?
Mm-hmm. And not only will the Golden Globes be back, they'll be back at the Beverly Hilton specifically.
The International Ballroom. I'll see you there.
Yes. So that was an image of Patricia Danaher on the red carpet at the Beverly Hilton. And, you know, Patricia, I mean, you know the ins and outs of the industry. If you could maybe give the world a sense of what it's like in this post-pandemic world, which we're all trying to navigate through.
Well, you know, the industry suffered appallingly, I think, in the first 6 months or so. You know, it was faced with challenges never seen before. The only people who really continued working at the start of the pandemic were writers, because, you know, you're not location dependent or anything like that. And then all sorts of strange things started happening, where scenes being shot in separate locations. You know, dummies were being used in intimate scenes. You know, it was really quite shocking, but also kind of creative, you know, how storytellers managed to find a way, and, you know, actors managed to do stuff on Zoom, and, you know, the editing process mostly made it seem fairly seamless. But since, you know, I mean, we're not at the end of the pandemic, but in the last couple of months, it's very clear that a lot of money wasn't spent. So there's a war chest that a lot of studios and production companies have, and many people were reading materials. And as we know, many of us depended on television as our main kind of entertainment and sanity, you know, during these long times at home. So the demand for content has never been greater. So in many ways, you know, for creative people, it's probably a very good time now. You know, there are new post-production houses opening. You're hearing about, you know, more and more TV shows, documentaries being made. There's a certain degree of normality. So in many ways, I think this year won't be as rich, but I think 2023, there will be a lot of new stuff that, you know, as production resumes and as, you know, better protocol and safety standards are there. But, you know, like as we started our conversation, we need stories. we'll always need storytellers. It doesn't matter how much AI or you know, whatever godlessness or whatever it might be, you know, as human beings, we want stories. We want to gather together and be told stories in the dark, like our ancient forebears,
Right.
you know, and that is still there. So thankfully, you know, you as an actor and a singer, me as a writer, you know, the industry does go on. Our people want to read our stuff and hear us and see our work. So I think, you know, I think things are beginning to, you know, are beginning to ramp back up. And there's, as I said, there's a sign, there's plenty of money, and there's a hunger, and streaming is not going anywhere.
Right. And did you say, Patricia, it'll be 2023 by the time you expect?
Yeah, I think so, because, you know, like we didn't get the vaccine in this country until sort of March of this year. So, you know, everything is, and then not everybody's vaccinated, which is another topic. But I think, you know, from what I'm hearing, you know, there's quite a lot of production going on now. A lot of, you know, the bigger names that didn't necessarily do much last year or had stuff that was ready to promote in 2020 are involved. You know, they're on set, and, you know, I think the pickings will be richer in 2023, especially in terms of films and studio work.
And thank you for giving such a realistic appraisal, you know, of everything. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, Patricia herself is a very gifted storyteller. In fact, she is a mythologist. She is also an eco-psychologist. So, you know, as you could tell just by listening to her speak, she really connects all these different threads from, you know, thousands of years ago all the way to the present. I think there's a through line in her work. One thing that you did, which really struck my interest, was the 7 Deadly Sins, where you compiled all these different stories from around the world. If you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'd be delighted to. Well, you know, one of the things that connected you and I, you know, was Shaw, George Bernard Shaw, and you know, you have, you know, you've been educated. I think there was some Irish element, not only Catholic, in your education. And, you know, we're a nation of storytellers. The Irish are known for a lot of things, but one of the first things everybody says is story, and that whether that's through music or, you know, in the written word. And in Ireland, you know, storytellers and people who are humorous are really highly valued. You know, it's currency, and you know, it's very useful to be able to tell a story, and everybody would have a party piece, and, you know, there's some kind of old-fashioned things that still sort of persist there. So I grew up steeped in it. I was a very bookish child. I was always reading and writing, and, you know, moving into journalism, and I've written a number of different things. And I was a fellow at Harvard about 20 years ago, a Nieman Fellow, and since I've been in LA, I've been elected onto the board of this Harvard alumni group called Harvard Wood, which is Harvard in Hollywood, and I'm the director of publishing there. So I've published 2 anthologies, actually. I have a second one coming out now called Once Upon a Fairy Tale. So yes, I'll be launching that one pretty soon. And so basically what I've done with both of these things, I've been looking for new voices and new writers. So the first one I brought out 2 years ago, The 7 Deadly Sins. So I put out a call for submissions on stories connected with any of the 7 deadly sins, like juicy things like lust and revenge and jealousy. And I got a lovely mixture of poems and short stories there. You know, the gravitational pull, you know, says something about the dark side that's very compelling to all of us, you know. And then the most recent one then, kind of inspired by my study of mythology, where it was wonderful to actually revisit fairy tales. I thought, okay, well, let's do modern interpretations of fairy tales. I mean, how many Cinderella stories are there? You know, Pretty Woman. I mean, Hollywood is always going back. Little Red Riding Hood. You know, there's so many iterations of these stories. So I got some really, really interesting and juicy ones there as well. I'll give you a copy, and you can see I put a kind of Hansel and Gretel in an urban scenario, being chased by somebody on a cell phone. You know, the modern witches
riding on a cell phone instead of a broomstick.
Yes, you know, because the dangers are still, you know, that these kind of in our psyches, you know, there's don't go into the woods, don't go down the dark alleyway. I mean, all of these things are kind of repeated in contemporary stories. And actually, I'll give you a little exclusive here. I'm launching the Harvard Wood Literary Prize pretty soon, and I've been given the go-ahead from the university. So I'm looking for sponsors and, you know, partners to work with me on this. But it's going to be an international literary award that I've created, and I'll be the founder and the director of it. And I think I'm going to start off with biography. I think I'm going to make it in the first couple of years for the best biographies, and it will be utterly democratic. I will work with libraries and book clubs. And so the award will actually reflect what people are borrowing or what people are reading and talking about in groups. So I say, unlike the Nobel Prize, and it's not to be disrespectful, I do plan to try to reflect what's popular in the culture, you know. So that will be, I'm hoping that will be launched officially in January, but I'm working busily behind the scenes now, trying to find partnership to put this together. So I'm immensely proud of this.
In other words, Patricia, you're really trying to connect with what people resonate with in the current zeitgeist, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I want things to be democratic and accessible, which is why the libraries in particular, you know, I'm a great lover and supporter of the public libraries, and, you know, access to knowledge and information and everything should be democratic. You know, Carnegie knew a thing or two, you know, when he created these public libraries. And, you know, it's hard to imagine in modern times, you know, if parks and public libraries and the public space would have been given the primacy, you know, in these times, you know, than it was, you know, 200 years ago or more. And I value that very strongly, you know, free access to information, that it shouldn't, you know, your background or your income should have nothing to do with your ability to know things and improve yourself. And
exactly, Patricia, and really benefit from like the collective wisdom that we've accumulated over the centuries and millennia, right?
Absolutely.
And you can see, ladies and gentlemen, in the background at Patricia's place, she has all these statues of goddesses. There's Artemis and Hestia, who are two of my favorites because they're both virgin goddesses. And in fact, my film, The Billionaire, was all about chastity and purity. So I think that's another reason you liked The Billionaire so much.
You're very talented. I mean, not only have you got a fantastic voice, you know, but you've got great comic timing and ability and a lot of dark mischief in you. Very compelling. Very, very compelling.
Thank you. And honestly, Patricia, you know, I mean, my mother can tell you, I love fairy tales. In fact, I have, you can't really see them, but there's Rapunzel and Little Bo Peep and Beauty over there. Yep. And frankly, you yourself strike me as a fairy tale character. You know, it's like, you know, you're the Irish Glinda, the Good Witch. You know, and I remember during our rather extensive email exchange, we also talked about Saint Bridget, who is an Irish virgin saint, you know, and so really, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, Patricia knows her stuff. I mean, she has a master's degree already in mythological studies and depth psychology. She's at the tail end of her PhD in eco-psychology and the humanities. And I think, Patricia, one of the main areas of research you were doing for your PhD was, you know, trauma and kind of the healing process and you know, the psychology of grief, right?
Yes, and as I mentioned at the start, you know, I mean, I was a very young woman in Japan. I was only in my early 20s. Really, you know, I had no idea the depths of the seeds that were going down at that time that, you know, in later life, like now, you know, would really blossom for me. So one of the things that I came across while I was in Japan, the Japanese have a very healthy relationship with death. And I think it's because of how close they are to nature in general, and the spirituality that, you know, for Japanese people is innate and is imbued in all things, and cycles and air and wind and everything. And they have this tradition. There's a very beautiful and very loving bodhisattva called Jizo. I have some images of Jizo here I'd like to show you. So Jizo is this beautiful bodhisattva, and the mythology is that he protects babies who died either before birth or shortly after birth. And as you and I would know, famines, wars, death and hunger are very real things, and are very much a part of life. So the Japanese have created these memorial grounds throughout the country, and there are these little statues to commemorate and memorialize babies who died either before birth or shortly after. And there's no distinction between a termination, a stillbirth, a sudden infant death. They really make space for this kind of grief to be given a public space, and people can visit them. They can have anniversaries. They can, mark the passage of time that might have been celebrated had that baby lived and had the circumstances been possible for that child, to live and be brought up. And it's incredibly healthy. It's like, from the New Testament, in the midst of life, we are in death. Right. And the Japanese, yes. And unfortunately in the West, there's a squeamishness about death in particular, but God love you, if you've lost a baby, if you've struggled with IVF that didn't work, if you didn't meet somebody in your fertile years, and God forbid if you had to choose an abortion or a stillbirth, whatever it might be. And there's no place in the culture, and people, they really can't talk about it, let alone have a place to bury. I'm so sorry about this frog in my throat. Let alone have a place to visit, and to actually memorialize and tend to that grief. So during my studies of mythology, ritual was part of the studies. And these Japanese memorial grounds that I had seen as a young woman came back to me really, really strongly. So I began to write about this. And then I went on to this doctorate program in eco-psychology. And this approach to death and to incorporating death or thinking about death differently as the Japanese do seemed to me to be a really crucial thing, because I think every single one of us knows somebody who has suffered this kind of grief, and we would have witnessed, some of this concealed pain or this pain that, comes out every once in a while. So I'm completing my doctorate right now, and I'm working with people, counseling people, but I help people to make their own shrines in their own home, with Jizo very much at the center. And I've created these beautiful healing ritual gift sets that allow people, that contain everything. They're all handmade in Southern California, and they contain everything you need to give you a little agency, so you can make something that is meaningful to you and add things, letters or flowers or shells or whatever it might be, but that you honor your grief, and that you give space to it, and that you can tend to it, and that you can perhaps show it to people. And I've done things in people's gardens and in people's balconies and in people's homes. And I'm going up to Ojai tomorrow to talk to some people about putting some large Jizo statues in the public space. And again, like I said about the libraries, I feel really strongly that, I hope that Jizo will become known in the West, and that you're driving by in your car and you've some heartache or some memory comes up, and seeing this benevolent figure, you can feel, the love and the nurture, just like the little baby rescued from the underworld by Jizo.
Absolutely, Patricia, because like you said, I think all of the world, in many places of the world, there's a sense that unless a soul took form in human flesh, that, what's the big deal? How can you mourn someone that didn't exist, quote unquote? But, they had a soul. I mean, you really did lose an individual, whether or not you saw the individual materialized in physical form, right?
Yes, I also think, I think a male grief often gets really left out. I think that I have tremendous compassion for everybody affected here. But I've met young boys, who've said to me, I really wanted to meet my little sister and I never got to meet her. I've had grandparents, husbands, the woman's role in pregnancy is self-evident. But there's other grief also that gets hidden even more, and I really think this is unnecessary. And in some ways, I'm appealing to people who aren't part of a religious tradition.
Right.
Because even if you are, you have the benefit of ritual. you have the benefit of community and, being a part of, like today is Sunday. I just attended a lovely Japanese ceremony this morning. And, just to be with others, it's something that's very innate in us. And my secular constituents, I think still have this need as much as anybody else, psychological need to honor something. And I think the metaphor of ritual, it's a hugely valuable container. Some things are just too big to approach directly, but metaphor, icons, images, ceremony, really can comfort in so many meaningful ways that all the talking in the world, can't approach.
Right, because there are certain things that cannot be put into words, and yet, like you said, the power of metaphor and image, and I mean, really, ladies and gentlemen, that's what she's tapping into. Jizor, I think, to Patricia, is not so much a deity or a religious figure as much as a representation or manifestation of that very nurturing process of being healed, basically. And I mean, Patricia has shown this to me in person, and I really think, the eyes of the Jizor figure alone convey so much. And I think you can really see those years and years and years worth of, just like all the grief that so many human beings before us have endured. And, like you said, Patricia, nowadays when someone goes through that, they can tap into, that legacy of healing that so many human beings have experienced.
Yeah. Exactly. And, it might sound, foreign or, remote in some way, but, Jesus, like a cousin of St. Francis, is also a protector of animals, so it's really like the small and the vulnerable. And you alluded to St. Bridget, who's also associated with nature and animals. So, these archetypes are present in most cultures. I'm sure in Sri Lanka, there are probably, comparable bodhisattvas or archetypes as well, that have a similar protective and nurturing, function.
Absolutely. In fact, at some point, you're definitely going to have to come to Sri Lanka.
Happily.
Yeah. And there's so much more we can get into with Patricia. Maybe in season 3, she'll come back and we can, dive into more. Because like I said, the Golden Globes are only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this lady. And I chose her very deliberately today, ladies and gentlemen, because, as the first season of Gehan Cooray's Meeting of the Minds was mostly Sri Lankans. But now that I'm back in Hollywood, we're truly going global. And who more global to start with than Patricia? And as you could tell, she doesn't just do lip service to it. She really runs the gamut of culture, all the way from Ireland to Japan to Latin America, ancient Greece. You name it, she's like a compendium of cultural wisdom, and I can say that because I've also met her in person, and I think hopefully we can do lunch at some point again. And without giving away too much, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who have faith, I would like you to also keep Patricia and her family in your prayers. That's all I'm going to say. But she could really use the prayers of all those of you who have faith. So thank you, Patricia. This was a golden afternoon. Thank you.
Yeah, and it was my absolute pleasure, and I was delighted to be here, and I'll happily talk to you again. And the next thing now is we must have some Sri Lankan.
Yes, Sri Lankan cuisine, absolutely. That will be our next date.